All right, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on sustainable wastewater infrastructure and energy savings with SWIFT, which stands for the Sustainable Wastewater Infrastructure of the Future. My name is Sarah Lee, and I am the Clean Energy Engagement Specialist at the University of Michigan Graham Sustainability Institute. I organized this webinar series and help facilitate stakeholder engagement in partnership with the State of Michigan's Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy, otherwise known as EGLE. So we developed the Clean Energy and Energy Management webinar series to help highlight the work that Michigan communities are already undertaking with respect to clean energy and renewable energy. By providing local governments with practical advice for taking action related to clean energy, we hope to demystify the process a bit for other communities and show that these actions are possible and happening in communities big and small across the state. So today's webinar is unique in that we'll be showcasing a brand new opportunity for Michigan communities to explore and utilize. So during today's webinar, if you have a question, I will take them via the questions feature, which is near the bottom of the GoToWebinar console, which should be on the right side of your screen. And I encourage you to submit any questions as they occur to you throughout the webinar by entering them into this field. And when you submit a question, it will only be visible to myself. So don't panic if you don't see any other questions populating. So for today's webinar, I'm honored to introduce Shannon Zarrett, an Energy Technology Program Specialist at the U.S. Department of Energy, as well as Chelsea Merven, an ORISE Fellow with the DOE's Weatherization and Intergovernmental Programs Office. So in a moment, I'll pass over the reins to Shannon for an overview of SWIFT and all of its resources, and then I'll facilitate a Q&A with our guests and weave in as many audience questions as I can. So with that, I would like to welcome Shannon and Chelsea. Thank you for joining us today, ladies. And Shannon, I'll change the presenter over to you as well.
All right, can you see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect.
Great.
All right, guys, well, I am excited to be joining you guys today. And so let me minus myself out of the screen. Okay, and so I'm happy to talk to you about SWIFT, which is a program I manage here at the Department of Energy. And it has a bit of a little bit of a history. So I'll go into how we began the program, some of the results that came out of that first iteration, and then I'll transition into what we're doing now, as well as highlight some future programming we have coming down the pike. Okay, so SWIFT first began in 2016, and it was a 3-year partnership, and we worked with 70 different wastewater treatment facilities across the United States, with the primary goal of reducing energy intensity by 5% within that 3-year training window that we worked with them. And then in addition to that, helping them plan and prioritize the upgrades that would work best for the facilities in order to get to 30% long-term energy savings. So matching within their 10 to 20-year plan. And so on average, our facility saw about a 7% total energy reduction over their baseline for all of our reporting facilities. And I'll talk a little bit later about what that 6.9% actually represents, what recommendations we were making. But again, we saw that yield within a 3-year window. At the end of that 3-year training window, there were quite a number of different resources that we developed in order to support the program. And at the end, we were able to compile them all together into a toolkit, which is now available online. And I'll go through the structure of the training program. I'll go through some of the tools that are in the toolkit because I think they nicely showcase what that initial program was about, and how we're expanding it to future offerings. So essentially, this is a really good visual, and it depicts the generalized structure that we followed for SWIFT 1. So there are 4 main areas of focus. We first started out with data management. And so depending on where a facility was in terms of energy management, we had some that were just getting started. Really, they were used to getting their utility bills directly from their utility. They weren't necessarily tracking it or doing any kind of granular analysis. And so with them, we got them started with some simple techniques to keep that tracking sustainable over time and help guide them along to some more higher level analysis. For others, we were able to get them started right into a little bit more advanced regression analysis where they could get a little more insight on their data. And I'll talk about what that looks like in another model further down in the presentation. The second main area was infrastructure upgrades, so the actual technology processes and planning for upgrades. And so we started everybody on a level playing field where we really targeted and focused on the low-hanging fruit. So the no and the low cost options, making sure everybody had hit all of the ones that we typically recommend. And so all of our facilities were paired up with one of DOE's industrial assessment centers. And if you're not familiar with that infrastructure, there are several universities throughout the United States that receive funding from the Department of Energy to conduct energy assessments for critical infrastructure, wastewater being one of them. And so all of our partners received one of these energy assessments and received a suite of personalized, tailored recommendations. And that's typically where you're seeing that 5 to 7% energy intensity reduction within that 3-year window. So I'll reference that again. But essentially, after we hit the low-hanging fruit, we then started to move into the types of technologies that would yield a much more significant capital investment. And because they're capitally intensive, trying to strategically prioritize those upgrades so that all of the progress you made with that low-hanging fruit would not end up backsliding against the energy intensity spike that would go up with construction costs. Then we moved into project financing, so helping folks figure out if something was outside of the realm of their capital budget, what are some resources out there that they can use to fund those projects, whether that's at the local, state, or federal level. And then the last piece of it was helping facilities develop their long-term energy management plan, so putting it all on paper. And so I do want to just highlight some of the recommendations that our industrial assessment centers made. And so they covered quite a few different areas from installation, assessment, and operation. So again, it was these recommendations where facilities saw that 5 to 7% energy savings in less than a 2-year window, in fact. And a lot of times we'll work with utilities that say, we've done a lot of these. We've really taken care of this. I think we've probably done all the low-hanging fruit that we can do. But I really do have to commend our industrial assessment centers in that a lot of times they're able to find things that other consultants or other assessors haven't been able to point out before. And so where it may feel duplicative, sometimes it's worth just the one item that they may have found during that time. And so I highly encourage getting to work with the industrial assessment centers. Right now, I know that all of them are up for rebid, and so they'll find out very shortly who's won the contracts, which universities have won the contracts, but hopefully there'll be one in Michigan as well. Now, after we ran through those no and low cost options, I had mentioned that we then turned to more high impact measures. And so these are the types of technologies or management approaches that are going to yield your 15 to 30% energy savings. But of course, they're quite expensive. And the key to our programming around these high impact measures has always been learning through peers. And so a lot of times we'll bring in folks that have advanced the state of technology They've implemented these successfully and have quite a number of lessons learned that they would love to share with their peers. And so it's very peer driven once we get into this, as well as working with our experts that have been on the ground during the implementation phase. And so we can help utilities prioritize which high impact technologies make the most sense, at least in the short term, whether that's 5 to 10 years, versus down the line, a much more longer term investment. And so a lot of that also varies. You do want to make sure that all of the gains that you made with your low hanging fruit don't end up backsliding back as you implement one of these higher impact technologies that may be a little bit more energy intensive at first. And so one of the tools we developed to help facilities prioritize different technologies was our measure planning workbook. And so what this workbook allows you to do is basically score different criteria and weight them in terms of relative importance to your utility. And so this is pretty comprehensive. It covers everything from the initial environmental permitting impact, which is very important, as we see various states, have different limits for different chemicals and different contaminants. What's the payback period? What's the level of effort needed to install? What's the staff time needed to maintain? What are long-term operational costs? And so you can score and weight those criteria, and then the workbook will shoot back out a score, helps you prioritize which different technology to move forward on. So if upfront cost is prohibitive, then you can think about a different management approach possibly. So this is a sample of an outcome from our partner Miami-Dade, who participated in SWIFT 1.0. And so on the left-hand side, I know it's a little tinier, but on the left-hand side, they're walking through the impact of the low and no cost recommendations that the Industrial Assessment Centers made, both in terms of cost and energy efficiency. And then on the right-hand side, they're walking through the energy they saved throughout the 3 years of the training program. And so this is included in a pretty comprehensive strategic energy management plan. So not only do they highlight the impacts of the SWIFT program, but they're also planning and projecting out the types of upgrades that they intend to make over the next 5 to 10 years and how they intend to track progress against those goals. And so all of these resources that I just highlighted, as well as some of the sort of the case studies and the feedback from that initial program, are located on our website on the Better Building Solution Center. And so not only applicable to wastewater, we have over 2,500 solutions, all targeting state and local sectors with large buildings, all kinds of different energy consuming sectors. So there's a ton of resources available to you. Okay, so now I'll transition into where we're going with SWIFT 2.0. And so one of the things we noticed in working in the first iteration of the program was that facilities were at varying stages in terms of prioritizing energy savings and energy development. In a lot of areas, some jurisdictions had a relatively static energy bill for quite a long time. And one of two things was happening. Either their jurisdiction set a net zero goal, or a new regulatory requirement was coming down the pike, and that was going to require a much more energy intensive process. And so they were going to see their bill skyrocket. On the other hand, you did also have utilities that were taking initiative and working towards advancing different energy technologies, whether that was renewable energy, advanced data management, resource recovery. And so we had various stages of development. And so in order to accommodate those, we split our efforts into two different tracks. And so in phase 2 of SWIFT, we have two main goals. We want to work with 100 different facilities to help them achieve 5% short-term and help them plan to 25% long-term savings. So it's going to look a lot like SWIFT 1. We basically want to replicate the progress and the results of SWIFT 1 for a wider audience of utilities. In the second track, we want to work with a much smaller cohort of 25 utilities who are interested in advancing the field in one of 4 different categories. And I'll talk about what that looks like. I'll break all of these down in a second. And so the idea there is that we can build a library of successful case studies where, again, we just build that learning by doing, build those lessons learned, so we can share with the greater community. So I'll use some language here so that when I'm referencing the 2 tracks, you can recall what I'm talking about and make sense of that. So the first track is Swift Toolkit Training. And so this is for facilities that are interested in prioritizing energy savings. You don't necessarily have to just get getting that point where you're just getting started. We do encourage advanced facilities to participate, and I'll explain why in a little bit. And then the Energy Recovery Accelerator is for facilities that are ready to push those boundaries on advanced technologies. So, getting into things like AI for optimized energy performance, machine learning, renewable energy integration, advanced resource recovery, things like that. So I'll break down what Swift Toolkit Training. This is the first track of this new phase. And so it's going to look a lot like Swift 1. So we're going to prioritize these 4 main project areas. The difference here, though, is we are trying to target this program state by state. And we've recognized that every state has their own unique financing mechanisms, their unique regulatory requirements, and in some cases even their own unique resiliency considerations. So, for example, our partners in California have very different climate considerations. Some are located along fault lines versus those that are in North Carolina and subject to considerable flooding and hurricane events. And so we have an opportunity with the toolkit training to take advantage of very localized expertise, and to really give an opportunity to share those localized lessons learned. So I really think that the application of toolkit training on a state-by-state basis rather than the national approach that we took in Swift 1 is going to yield some interesting results, certainly. And so again, we'll focus on data management, and so helping folks prioritize that, whether they, something they may not be tracking to significant detail. But again, if you're a little bit more advanced in your data management, we can certainly work with you to build more predictive models, so you can start to think about predictive maintenance rather than corrective maintenance, and just confirm your assumptions about what's actually impacting your energy intensity. And I'll talk about what those models look like in a little bit. Same thing with measure planning. So for folks that haven't had the opportunity to get an energy assessment, would benefit from that, we can certainly work with them to connect them with the right players to get an energy assessment. For those who feel that they've tackled all the low-hanging fruit, then we would prioritize really sharing lessons learned and focusing our efforts on significant technical exchanges, so that they can think about, what are the types of upgrades that they want to make in the future that are going to yield some significant results. And so they can talk to our past partners and partners from our sister program and Better Plants, and learn about, what do they wish they knew before they had implemented this technology. We'll do the same thing with financing. Only when it comes to the financing, we'll be much more focused in on the different mechanisms that are at the state level, and then we can talk about, what makes a good competitive package for a federal level grant. And then the last piece of the program, we will be showcasing our new 50,001 Ready Navigator, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but it provides a very nice framework to help utilities draft a long-term energy management plan. And so these 4 main points will be very similar, but we'll be infusing a lot of the lessons that we learned out of Swift 1 and even some of the data points we're getting out of the Accelerator into the Toolkit training. And we want this to be also to feature a very comprehensive mix of stakeholders. And so we're engaging universities, rural water associations, water environment associations, all kinds of state and local governments and nonprofits. So we really want to make sure that there's a comprehensive network of stakeholders involved that can share their insights as well when we conduct these trainings. Now I'll talk a little bit about the Accelerator because it's slightly different in nature and approach. And so again, this is the smaller cohort. This is where we're targeting 25 utilities. And so those 25 utilities will sit down with us and choose one of 4 technology tracks. We typically tell them, choose the track that best represents where you guys are prioritizing your work in the next 5 to 10 years. And so we don't restrict them from sitting in on all of these 4 workshops, but in the interest of time, a lot of utilities, tend to be time limited, and so we want to respect their time and make sure that it fits well within their schedules. And so within these 4 tracks, we've got energy capture. So that covers resiliency, on-site generation, renewable energy integration. So typically what we're seeing folks telling us out of this track is that, we've got a jurisdiction, they've set a net zero goal, and we've tried solar, we've tried inline hydropower, we just haven't been able to make the business case. The cost of electricity has been relatively low in a lot of areas. And so we just haven't been able to make the economics of it work. And so figuring out, how to do that, how to implement solar, and even unique technologies for implementing solar. So some don't have, as much land access. Is there the potential to, install it on rooftops or install it on some other piece of machinery? If you have lagoons, can I install solar as a floating apparatus? So a lot of the different technologies that they can utilize there. Another key piece is biogas. So a lot of facilities generate biogas, which helps them power their energy needs. And again, in order to get to net zero, a lot of utilities would like to increase capacity. And some of the challenges that go along with that, often when you're increasing capacity, you have to introduce food waste or fats, oils, and greases. And what ends up happening is that the EPA does not designate the same value as soon as you start adding food waste into your digestate. So the value of the renewable energy credit that you get from that can go down. And so the expense of increasing the storage capacity and the production capacity might not equal out. So there are some strategies that folks can think about to get around that. In the second category, we're looking at energy efficiency. And so folks are interested in what is on the cutting edge, what's out there, what are people piloting, what are the newest technology providers. They really want to hear a lot of shared lessons learned in this category. And then also thinking very holistically whenever they're ready to initiate an upgrade, or in some cases, some of them are building new plants. How can they holistically think about energy efficiency as they're planning for these upgrades? So not just the primary components, but all the ancillary support features. In the third category, we're going to be focusing very much on the resource recovery element of it. And so what resources can you recover? What kind of economic valorization can you make for those resources? And then there are going to be some challenging ideas around certain nutrient removal as we go forward and regulatory requirements become more stringent. And so that introduces the PFOA and the PFOS issues, so different phosphates, and how are you going to deal with getting those contaminants out of your biosolids. And then the last category has arguably been, I would say, the most popular among all of our utility partners. And so this is advanced data management. And so what we found is that a lot of utilities have a ton of data coming in. They've got a lot of sub-meters installed, so there's just a ton of data that's coming in. And they don't have a comprehensive dashboard where they can look all of that and make any types of predictive or strategic decisions. And so again, as I was saying, predictive maintenance versus corrective maintenance, strategic decisions about how you operate the facility to get the most out of your energy performance. And so the idea behind that is just working with them to develop that centralized dashboard. And then, of course, considerations as we move into more advanced ideas behind AI and machine learning, and then even considerations when it comes to cybersecurity, if we've got anybody storing that data anywhere. Okay, now, another component of the program, in addition to that core technical content, is we have two different tools, and I've referenced these a little bit in the front. Our 50,001 Ready Navigator is the tool that we're going to be using to help supporting people when they're developing a long-term energy management plan. And so it provides a really, really nice centralized framework for it. So it walks you through a series of 25 steps, and it shoots back out a series of playbooks that you can use to just copy and paste essentially into a strategic plan. But it allows you to track your progress against goals, to outline your priorities, and basically just put everything down so that way you can even identify. There are some opportunities within the exercise of going through that framework where you can identify opportunities for energy savings. Our second tool is our energy performance indicator tool. So this is a little bit more of an advanced data analysis platform. So you can do a little bit of regression analysis in that. And so essentially what that does is you can confirm or potentially reveal some information about what's impacting your energy intensity. In many cases, you just get a confirmation. It's the aerators, it's the blowers, it's what we think it is. But sometimes it can reveal some insights where, oh, we didn't think about that. We need to look at that, and maybe that's an area where we can see some improvements. And so for both of these tools, we can set you up to work with someone who can take your data and walk you through. This is also very similar for our scenario modeling tool. So our measure suite basically allows you to model different scenarios. So if you're interested in implementing a new technology and you want to see how it's going to play out, this tool can help you do that. And so it also has a couple of different modules as well if you want to learn how to optimize your processes, your pumps, your fans, your heaters, things like that. So again, all of these three tools that I've just highlighted right now, we certainly can connect you with one of our team members, and they can walk you through how to use it and take your data and help you get some insight from that. Now, in terms of timeline, I can go through essentially what the accelerator is going to look like. So we've had our initial partner conversations. Essentially, we've sat down with all of our utility partners and had a 1-hour planning meeting. During that meeting, we get to know them, get to know their processes, and get to know what their priorities are. From there, we basically craft a very tailored program for them, break them down into their track-specific exchanges, have them sign off on it, and then we kick off the technical workshops. And so we'll start those technical workshops in the fall, and we'll continue them on for another year. When it comes to data collection, we certainly will encourage utilities if we're making any specific recommendations. We would love to see how our recommendations play out, but it is not required. So we can help facilities that haven't established their baseline establish that, and we're happy to work with them to get some additional insight on their data. But again, it is not required, but we would love to see it, especially if we're recommending anything to them. After the technical component, we'll transition into financial planning. So again, this will focus on what are the state, local, and federal incentives, how to make a competitive application, what are some unique financing mechanisms that perhaps they hadn't considered. And then the final piece of the program is that every utility is paired up with their own in-house consultant. And so they can work with them for up to 10 additional hours. So any of our tools and resources, they can make in-plant recommendations, so they can do a wide range of things. And so just to know that issuing RFPs is not required of the program. Typically, we're working with folks that are on the cusp of issuing an RFP, and they see this program as a great opportunity to help them chart that out, so they're getting the specs and the team members that they're looking for, and that they're making sure they're making the right decision moving forward for their plant. So when you're signing up to the accelerator, what we're really looking for is participation. All of these other pieces of it are idealized outcomes. You're not required to issue an RFP. Many people are at that stage, but if you're, 5-10 years down the line, that's not a problem. Our goal is to provide you with the technical assistance that you need so that when you're ready to make those decisions, you feel confident in the decisions that you're making. Same with the energy intensity goal. We have folks that are pretty much very close to that 25% over their baseline. And so they've already tackled that. And so reporting energy data to us is optional, and we can help you develop that final strategic plan. So again, idealized outcomes, what we're really looking for is for you to participate in our technical exchanges and work with your technical consultant. Now, another critical component of our program is that we wanted to build in some continuity. So we have 3-year training, but we also have a sister program funded by the Advanced Manufacturing Office within the Department of Energy called Better Plants. And Better Plants works with all major energy consuming sectors, and specifically do have quite a number of wastewater treatment facilities joined up. And so if you have enjoyed the program, you're getting a lot out of it, you enjoy working with your technical consultant, and you want to keep that relationship going, this is a good way to keep that continuity, is to sign up to continue on through Better Plants. But it's also great to get started with us because we are a system that is specifically focused on wastewater treatment. You get to learn with your peers with lower commitments, and then you can continue on through Better Plants. And so typically we get a number of frequently asked questions. So in terms of time commitment, that's always a consideration. And so just to note that this accelerator covers a 3-year time period. We want to space all of the sessions out. We'll coordinate everything with the facilities, and all of the individual technical assistance with your TA, your technical account manager, is at your discretion. If you're already involved in a state-run program or working with a consultant, that's great. We love to create those synergies. So we happen to be working with the state of Michigan here. And so if you've got a consultant, we are more than happy to have them be your POCs. A lot of them are very familiar with our tools and technologies, and we're releasing a lot of new modules. And so it's a great opportunity for them to get a first crack at that data. And in fact, we have a couple of utilities that are using their consultants as our primary POCs. We're also happy to cover regulatory barriers to implementation. This is a common theme that most of our partners have raised, whether it's, issues surrounding new trends in nutrient removal requirements, whether it's the treatment of biogas and biosolids. All of that, comes into play in a comprehensive conversation. But it raises a much more important feature of the program, is that we're meant to be responsive to the facility. So both the accelerator and the toolkit training are meant to really engage one-on-one with each of our partners and understand what are they interested in. So it's not meant to be, we take the time to think what you want to hear. We want to be responsive to you. So it's not meant to be death by PowerPoint. And so if there's an issue or a topic that our partners want to address, we will cover it. And we'll also make sure that we take stock of the program regularly to make sure the content is on point with expectations. In terms of energy data, again, Sharing energy data with us is encouraged but optional. We'd love to see how our recommendations play out. If you do end up sharing with us, we keep all of that data confidential and we only share it in the aggregate. So that graphic that I had displayed up front at the beginning of the presentation, that's typically how we share data. And we have the platform to highlight any partner successes. You just let us know, and we're happy to share that with our audience. And then for states that do require continuing education for their operators, we're happy to try to work with the state to see if we can get CE credit for our workshops. Sometimes we know that there are a lot of very specific requirements for each state, especially for a virtual platform. So we may not be able to secure it every time, but we will try our best to make sure that our programming fits within their parameters. So in terms of future programming, so I've outlined those two opportunities to get involved. So the Toolkit training is a great way to work alongside other utilities in Michigan to have a very localized and specialized programming. The Accelerator provides a really great national perspective to work with other utilities across the nation on advancing advanced energy technologies, whether that's renewables, AI, machine learning, resource recovery, or advanced efficiency measures. But we do also have quite a number of future activities planned. And so if the timing doesn't necessarily make sense right now, but you still want to be connected and learn, what we have coming down the pike, there's quite a number of opportunities. And so within the next year, we are planning for a 50,001 ready cohort. And so that will focus on that framework that I outlined. And so for facilities that maybe they have never had a strategic energy management plan, maybe their plan is 10 years or older, we can help work with you one-on-one to draft that. And through that process, we typically tend to find that people find some significant energy savings. Just to drop an example, the Ford Energy Company is a user of the 50,001 Ready Navigator that we produced, and even they were able to find some energy savings opportunities at their manufacturing plant. So it's certainly a very useful framework. And we'll probably start that in the spring of 2022. We also have plans to conduct a few virtual in-plant trainings. COVID has really taught us how to do a lot of our programming online. And so whereas we used to go into the plan and provide recommendations, we've learned how to do some of this virtually, which makes us a little bit more accessible to a wider audience, especially if they don't have an industrial assessment center located in that state. And so we can help you, determine how to conduct your own energy assessments. So you can keep going back and essentially self-auditing to make sure that you're hitting your targets and your gains. We're also very interested in looking at resiliency modeling and planning. And so again, I think I mentioned this, a lot of our partners, certainly have a lot of concerns about extreme weather events and what would happen if they were kicked off the grid, and just maintaining continuity of process. And so helping people plan for in the event of an outage or severe weather event, how do they keep things running? How do they account for all of those so that disaster doesn't break out? And then of course, one of the benefits of getting to work nationally, both in the Accelerator and on a state basis, is we basically have quite a robust catalog of different projects and different lessons learned. And so really a component of sort of the sunsetting of this program will be putting all of that information together in a compendium of lessons learned, case studies, business models for technologies. So for example, solar. So trying to create a good business model for solar against the backdrop of lower electricity costs. So those are the types of things that we're considering in the future. So if the timing for the Accelerator and the Toolkit training doesn't necessarily fit within your time right now, we have plenty to stay tuned for. And so I think we I'm gonna give it some time for Q&A because I want to make sure that I get to everybody's questions. But we've been around for some time now. We kicked off in the summer of 2022. And so we're currently still welcoming state, regional, local agency, as well as utility partners. So if you have any interest in this program, I'm your best point of contact. Don't hesitate to reach out to me. And then you can follow us if you want to look at some of the resources that I referenced online. This is our Better Building Solution Center over towards the left-hand side. That's where you'll find a lot of the Swift Toolkit resources that I had highlighted through the presentation. But I'll take some time now to stop and take some questions. Or maybe.
Great. Thank you so much, Shannon. That was excellent. Great information. And awesome. We have Chelsea joining us as well for audience Q&A. A reminder, if anyone listening in has any questions, feel free to put that into the questions feature on the GoToWebinar console. But to kick things off, we do have a couple questions here. I'm curious, have there ever been in your projects that you've worked on in other communities, have there been any hiccups or unexpected results during a partnership? And how did you overcome them, and what were the lessons learned?
Yeah, certainly. So a lot of times we can spend quite a bit of time working with the utility and drafting out plans and drafting out different approaches. And then a regulatory dynamic might change. And so what we ended up drafting out and laying out doesn't meet with their permitting requirements. And so we have to go back to the drawing board. And so that's something that we've learned to really pay attention to, and that's another part of why we took it state by state, because of the way that the EPA has structured the primacy for the Clean Water Act. A lot of times different states have different requirements for nutrient removal, so we like to pay attention to different trends and make sure that we're really plugged in to the State Department of Environmental Protection as well, and kind of have a good understanding of what may come down the line, not just within the next few years, but potentially within the next 5 to 10. And a lot of times the utilities do have a good sense of that, but it's certainly something that we need to keep in mind as we go through. And I would say a lot of other times, one of the other challenges we run into is getting a good model with the data that we have. So a lot of times we can be working with utilities that almost are constantly under construction. So their energy consumption looks very, very scattered when you're looking at the data set, and it could be hard to build a really good model that helps them. And so we've tried to develop some tools and methodologies so that we can build something that the utilities can work with, but kind of takes it out of the level of granularity that's going to drive them crazy. But those are some things that we've looked at and have kind of thought about, working at a little bit more detail on.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We do have some questions coming in. But one thing I wanted to ask too is, can you talk more about the timeline for the SWIFT Toolkit training and how long before facilities generally see, energy reductions?
Sure. So the Swift Toolkit training is different from the Accelerator. And so I think, in the presentation for the Accelerator, that has a very defined project timeline. So starting, now, and I do want to caveat by saying if you're interested in the Accelerator, please let me know. We do want to be as flexible as possible, even though we're really about to kick it off this fall. If there's somebody that approaches me and is really passionate and interested in it, we still have time, plenty of time to get you up and running into the program. But the toolkit training is much more flexible, and we have plenty of time to execute that. I think we have about 4 more years within that working period. And so typically what we do is work with our signatory partners, depending on who that is in each state, and define a timeline that works best for not only our signatory partners, but also the utility. So it's very, very flexible. between now and 4 years. So if this year is a little too tight and we're finding that people are kind of consensus is, 2022 or fall of 2022, then we can absolutely make that work. Oh, and then the time. So in terms of payback period, so again, we start everybody on that same playing field of tackling the low hanging fruit. And so you're going to see that the recommendations our industrial assessment centers make typically have a 3-year payback. In many cases, it's less. It's around a 2-year payback period of 5 to 7% energy savings. Some of the higher level capital improvements, depending on your capital budgets and how soon you can implement them, that could be anywhere from 5 to 10 years, just depending on how soon you can implement those changes.
Excellent. Great. Well, thank you. One question we have coming in is how do these programs work with small utilities? Will they also benefit from this initiative?
Yes. So for the smaller utilities, we have a strong working partnership with the National Rural Water Association, which prioritizes smaller utilities. And so oftentimes you'll find an industrial assessment center might, set a cap at saying you have to consume this amount of energy, this much energy, or you have to treat this many million gallons a day in order to get an energy assessment, whereas the rural water associations don't have that cutoff. And so in our partnerships with them, we can absolutely, serve a lot of the smaller utilities. And in fact, we speak to many of our smaller utilities. When it comes to the accelerator, I think the smallest one I have is 0.45 to 0.5 mgd per day treated. And so the largest one is upwards of sort of the 78. I think at total capacity was 170 mgd. And so there's a huge range in the accelerator in terms of size, but we have no size restrictions. We don't have any cutoffs, but we do take it under consideration when we're covering anything technical where size is relevant. We'll make sure that we're pairing you with the partners we've worked with that are similarly sized, that have a similar process, but also a lot of the recommendations that we make, we tend to try to make sure that they're kind of size holistic so that every utility can benefit from them.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really useful. That's great. Another question, is there a cost to participate?
So no, there are no costs at all to participate. And obviously, there would be capital costs if you were to take any of the higher capital recommendations and put them into place. But that's where that financing piece of that puzzle, where we'll help you identify a good mix of financing opportunities so that you can implement those higher capital improvements.
Okay, great. Let's see. Can water treatment facilities participate as well as wastewater treatment facilities?
So yes, both water and wastewater treatment facilities can participate. And in fact, in the accelerator, we do have, I think, at least 3 water treatment facilities that have signed up. So yeah, it's open to both. And if we can get enough, I'd love to do a very water treatment specific cohort where we're focusing on some topics that are just particular to them.
Okay. So how can state and local governments participate in SWIFT 2.0?
That's a great question. So state and local governments are typically one of our levels of signatory partners. And so what we ask of them is if they're interested in participating, they would sign a similar agreement. It doesn't look quite like this particular agreement is very directed towards the utilities. And they would sign an agreement with us, and it would essentially, in exchange for us developing a very customized and tailored program for the state or local municipality that they're focused on, they would just help us coordinate within the state. So helping us make the connections to the utilities, helping connect us with the right nonprofits and right government organizations in the area. So just helping us really get the lay of the land, which is so key to implementing the toolkit training.
Mhm. Okay. So this is what this, I know there's a partnership already with the state of Michigan and you guys. So is this what Eagle is doing in Michigan right now? Is helping you with those partnerships and working with the utilities? Is that correct?
Yeah, so yeah, this is essentially the first step that we typically take is hosting an informational webinar, starting to get that word out. And then what we'll likely see, I think we're probably on a trajectory in Michigan to pick up the workshops in the spring of 2022. I think this is usually how we begin. We do some individualized recruitment, sit down with people so they can get an idea of what it is that we're doing one-on-one, learn a little bit more about them. And then once we get that feedback, we can really program that into some tailored content.
Okay, great. And so if sorry if I'm going back and forth a little bit, but if a community does want to be a part of that Michigan cohort, they should contact you. That's correct?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, so I'm going to be your primary point of contact. If you were to email me right now, I would be the one I'd get right back to you, instantaneously. And it may you may be a while before I get enough folks interested before we kick it off. But I would make sure that we keep you informed and that we know we'll work with you once we get everything set up. But yeah, just let me know, reach out to me, and then we'll keep you in the loop as we keep developing the program.
Perfect. Okay, great. Let's see, a couple more questions here. How is the 50,001 Ready Navigator being incorporated into Swift 2.0?
So the navigator will have its own separate cohort. However, you will receive training on how to use it within Swift. So if you join the Accelerator or the Toolkit training, that is going to be our foundational resource to help you build a strategic energy management plan. So you're still going to get that training on it, but if you want somebody to basically, take your data, work with you one-on-one and help you build that plan out with you, that's where you can turn to the cohorts next. And so those will take place spring of 2022. Okay. But you'll still have plenty of exposure to 50,001 if that doesn't fit in the timeline.
Okay, excellent. Could you speak more on the two different tracks and how the workshops will be implemented, and will facilities have much input during those?
Sure. So within both of these tracks, a huge fundamental focus is sitting down with the utilities one-on-one. And I know it does take a considerable amount of time, but that is such a key feature of the program, because we really want to understand where the utility is at, where their priorities are, what are the challenges, what are the barriers to moving forward towards their goals. That helps us build out the program. So we don't want to sit there and bark information at folks and it's just sort of a death by PowerPoint rather than something that is a useful and focused technical exchange. And so the utilities are really the core of the program. We really take our cue from them. And so in implementing any of the workshops, we typically sit down with each utility for at least a half an hour just to get to know them a little bit more.
Okay, that's great. Good. And let's see. I think the last one we have currently is how can water-focused nonprofits and member associations get involved with SWIFT?
So yeah, very, very similar to the state and local governments. So in some states, the signatory partners are, the state energy offices or the state environmental protection agency. In other states, it's the Rural Water Association or the Water Environment Association. So if you are, a nonprofit organization, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to work with you. We'd love to be partnered with you. So if you have programming that you offer, we'd love to find a way to synergize with you and sort of piggyback and add on anything new that we've developed onto that. So yes, please feel free to reach out to me.
Excellent. One more coming in. It sounds like a great program. We're wondering what the catch is. Free to participate, partner facilities, voluntarily committed to energy savings. Why wouldn't someone want to, or why might you not want to participate? Are there some communities that maybe aren't ready yet, or what's the catch?
Yeah, so we've tried to design it so that there is no catch. Now, what typically ends up happening, and I can share from, we've been recruiting for this initiative for 9 months, and so we've talked to probably over 200 utilities. What tends to be the driving key factor is the time commitment. And some of them have worked, I think the challenge is they've worked in a similar program and perhaps got burned by the amount of time that they had to commit. And now they can be a little hesitant about, committing to something like that. In other cases, there are just some utilities who feel that they've done everything that they want to do. They've advanced as far as they want to advance, and that they're in a good place. And so for us, we understand the timing element, and I do think in the first iteration of the program it was a little bit more of a time commitment. And for me in this second round, I really wanted to make this as flexible as possible, and that every time you have contact hours with us, it's valuable. And so that's really a key feature of the second part of the program. But the truth is, if somebody comes in, they sign the agreement, and the time is too much, and they say, Shannon, this is just a lot. I think that I didn't anticipate this. I think unfortunately we're going to have to pull out. That's not a problem, and that's the whole point of the voluntary setup. But really, what you're looking at, for example, with the Accelerator is you have an hour-long planning meeting with me, a 2-hour-long kickoff meeting, and a 2-hour-long workshop for the rest of the calendar year of 2021. So you're looking at 5 hours worth of time. And for the rest of, for on a yearly basis, we're hoping to keep it at a minimum of, 20 hours. Now, if we get a group together that really loves to chat, they're enjoying, and it's a robust conversation, we're going to keep it going. We'll make it expansive. But we really want to feed off of the energy of the group that we have.
Great. That's great that you have that flexibility. That's excellent. Well, I think that's it. And I just wanted to thank you both for joining us today.
Absolutely.
That excellent information. I do want to share here my screen one more time. Moving this stuff out of the way. Here we go. Hopefully you guys can see that. We do have some upcoming webinars, but I do also want to mention, I'm getting ahead of myself. As Shannon mentioned, if anyone in the audience is interested in participating in SWIFT or would like more information, you can contact her. Also, we have a follow-up exit survey, and there's a question on there specifically asking if you would like more information to provide your contact information there, and we will send that directly to Shannon. So a couple ways to get more information, and that survey will pop up when you exit this exit the webinar now, and also it will be emailed to you tomorrow. So again, thank you everyone for joining. We have some upcoming webinars in August and September with EPA resources for local governments and experiences with Michigan Community Solar. And so stay tuned for the Eagle website for more information, and check your inboxes as well. But have a fantastic remainder of your day.